Talk about some of the market action we've been watching lately, Jim, as well as sort of the retail investor activity, which has been, I guess some would argue, surprisingly robust. Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, I've seen this many, many times over the years that the retail investors, no matter how many times you talk about it, they sell low and they buy high. It's the oldest. Well, you know, that's not entirely fair. They do sell low. They don't necessarily buy at tops, but they do buy well off the bottoms. And by the way, it's not just retail investors. I see the same thing in M&A. They never buy at the bottom. They're always, you know, going for big acquisition when the market is robust. But there's something psychologically that people need a feeling of greater comfort. I was thinking about this earlier today. There are some people, and I have a list of names, who got so angry with me when I said, you know, I think it's a good time to buy in March, which, as you know, I said on this show. And they were just furious. They're saying, oh, you know, that's reckless. You know, we're going off the cliff. And some of them I would say, look, I don't know what we're doing, but I'm just saying we're you know, so far below where we were, it's got to be a good time to buy it. But I would love to call some of them up to see what they're saying now, but I'm not going to do it. I don't want to gloat. That's not the point. But I just wonder about these people, what they're thinking now or whether they aren't thinking. I know that we see the pattern over and over.
Right. So when people look at the disparity between the apparent mood of the so-called, I've heard them referred to as Robin Hood traders or investors now, versus the giants who have come out with net negative views, Buffett, Druckenmiller, and the like, you think the giants, the billionaires, are right?
Well, you know, I don't try to make predictions, really. I just look at where things are and where they've been. And we went way below, you know, market highs in March. And that's always, in my experience, if you're a long-term investor, it's always a great time to buy. Not maybe in the next week or even month, but eventually it's a great time to buy. And the same thing is true. Like I was saying, I think a year ago or so, it was time for people to look at their portfolios to think about rebalancing because, you know, the market was up 35 or more percent, and that's another threshold, I think, when it's time to make sure that your stock allocations haven't gotten out of line. So if you've done that now, then you ought to be in a very good place. You ought to be right about where your asset allocation ought to be, and you ought to be prepared if it goes up or down. But I do feel now, you know, this isn't the buying opportunity it was in March. That I can say, you know, almost with a certainty. There still is a lot of unknowns about the pace of recovery, the speed with which we get a vaccine. And while the news has been very good this week, which I think is why the market has gone up a lot, you know, that, as I say, I don't call it easy money, but a lot of the big gains in this market, I think, have probably now been made.
Yeah, interesting, Jim. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the increasing tensions between our country and China. Some of it may simply be a result of the election campaign, trying to shift blame perhaps, but it is having a real impact, or certainly could, it would seem, on both countries' economies, not to mention their markets.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've been concerned about the trade wars, you know, for quite some time. I just feel right now, I find it so frustrating because the U.S., China, and, you know, let's face it, every other country in the world, we face a common enemy. It's a biological phenomenon. It's this virus. You know, throw Russia into this mix. Typically, when everybody has a common enemy, that is a perfect time to bury petty differences, at least for the time being, and join forces to vanquish that enemy. And this just seems to me as a golden opportunity for both the leaders of the United States and China to say, look, there's something bigger out here that we need to deal with before we worry about some of these issues that are on the table. So let's make some compromises. Let's find common ground we can go forward. Let's put that aside for now. Let's beat the virus. Let's see what we can do working together, and then let's come back and deal with these things. And I just can't believe that wouldn't be a great message for both sides. We seem to be going in the opposite direction, and now we have China kind of taking advantage of the fact that it's things with the U.S. I assume they feel are about as bad as it can get. So they're making moves on Hong Kong. They're they're rumbling elsewhere. They're thinking we might as well do everything we want to do that the U.S. is going to dislike because things aren't getting any worse. And I think that's very bad. It would be great if we had some incentives in place for the two countries to work together. But I do feel I'm kind of wasting my breath.